So we're diving into the University of Technology, Sydney today.
UTS.
Yeah, UTS.
Okay.
You've given us a ton of info, and I know from experience that trying to sort through all of that
Right.
when you're trying to choose a university can be
Absolutely.
really overwhelming, especially when it's on the other side of the world. So our goal here is to break it all down,
Yep.
extract the most important parts of what UTS offers so our listeners can get a clear picture.
Exactly.
Oh,
We really want to give you a solid understanding of not only what UTS is, but what it could mean for you.
right.
We're talking about why it's a good choice.
Yeah.
How do you actually get in?
Right.
What's it like to be a student there?
Yeah.
What are the potential downsides?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
And how can your time at UTS set you up for your future career?
Yeah, and you've brought a bunch of different types of sources,
Right.
like official university stuff, as well as what students have to say, and even some success stories, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, some really cool ones.
So, okay, UTS keeps coming up as a top pick. What is it about this university that makes it so appealing? Why should someone considering studying abroad have UTS on their list?
The one thing that jumps out is that it's really branded as a creative and career-focused university.
Okay,
And it's in Sydney, which is a big plus for a lot of people.
definitely.
It was founded in 1988, so it's a fairly young university, but it's made a big impact,
Okay.
not just in Australia, but worldwide. And its ranking in the QS World University Rankings is consistently in the top 150.
Wow.
Yeah, that's for 2024. So
Wow.
that's pretty current.
Yeah, that's a strong indicator. So what does a top 150 global ranking actually mean for someone who's thinking about their career after they graduate?
Well, it tells you that a degree from UTS is going to be recognized by employers,
Right.
not just in Australia, but internationally. And it usually means they're focused on quality teaching and research,
Okay.
which can open doors for you later on.
Yeah, and aside from the rankings, UTS has a pretty big and diverse student body.
Yeah, over 45,000 students.
Wow.
And get this, over 15,000 of those are international students.
That's incredible.
I know, right? That kind of diversity makes for a really rich learning environment.
Definitely.
You get exposed to different perspectives, different ways of thinking, which is invaluable.
Absolutely, especially in such a globalized world.
Yeah, you get a broader understanding of global markets,
Mhm.
and it can even lead to more innovative solutions
I see.
when you're working in diverse groups on projects.
Okay, so I keep seeing this phrase, industry integrated practical learning approach.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like at UTS?
So it's not just about learning theory. It's about getting hands-on experience
Okay.
using their state-of-the-art facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, in their engineering and IT faculties,
Which cover things like.
AI data science, cybersecurity,
Right.
students work on projects that are linked to real-world industry problems.
Wow, so they're getting practical experience.
Exactly. Like they might do capstone projects with companies,
I see.
which helps them gain skills and even make contacts before they even graduate.
That's amazing.
And their business school has some really strong global partnerships. So they offer things like international case studies, and they bring in industry leaders for guest lectures.
Wow.
And even in their health and science programs, the focus is on applying what you learn in healthcare settings and research.
That's great. And I noticed they mentioned the design, architecture, and building faculty and something called the HTML0 brand.
Right, so that's basically just a way of highlighting how innovative and highly regarded that faculty is.
Yeah.
It's internationally recognized.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems like across the board, UTS is really focused on preparing graduates for the real world.
Right, getting you job ready.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like a really good option for people who are career focused.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to something that every student has to think about. How do I get in?
Right.
What are the requirements for international students applying to undergraduate programs?
So the main things they look at are your secondary education English language proficiency. And there might be some additional requirements depending on the specific course you're applying to.
Okay, let's break that down.
Okay, so first you'll need to have finished secondary education that's equivalent to Australian Year 12.
Got it.
Then you'll need to prove that your English is good enough. And they usually use standardized tests for this, like IELTS, TOEFL, or PT Academic.
So what kind of scores are we talking about?
UTS generally wants an overall IELTS score of 6.5,
Okay.
with at least that score on each of the different sections of the test, or the equivalent score on TOEFL or PTE.
Got it.
And then, like I said, some courses might have extra requirements. Like if you're
Yeah.
applying for a design course,
Yeah.
they might want to see a portfolio of your work.
Right, so they might want to see some examples of your design work.
Yeah. Or if it's a music course, you might have to do an audition.
That makes sense. So it's not just about your grades, they're looking at the whole picture.
Exactly.
What about postgraduate studies? If you've already got a bachelor's degree, what does UTS look for in master's degree applicants?
So the most important thing is that you have a bachelor's degree from a recognized university.
Okay.
And for some programs, especially ones that are very career-focused like an MBA, they might also require relevant work experience.
Okay, so if you're going for an MBA, you might need to have worked in a business setting for a certain amount of time.
Right. And just like with undergraduate programs, you'll need to show them that your English is good enough through those same standardized tests, IELTS, TOEFL, or PTE.
Got it. So they're focusing more on what you've already achieved at university?
Yeah, and also your professional background if it's relevant to the program.
Right. Okay, now let's get to the financial side of things because for a lot of international students,
Yeah,
this is a major deciding factor.
absolutely.
So what are the estimated costs for tuition and living in Sydney?
So for undergraduate programs, the annual tuition fees can vary from around 30,000 to 45,000 Australian dollars,
AUD.
depending on the specific course and faculty.
Right.
And postgraduate programs are similar, roughly 32,000 to 50,000 AUD per year.
Okay, and then on top of tuition,
Yes, you have to think about living expenses,
rent, food, transportation.
all of that.
Right.
And they estimate that to be around 20,000 AUD per year in Sydney.
So it's a big investment.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But I know there are scholarships available. So what kind of financial support does UTS offer specifically for international students?
They actually offer a really good range of scholarships.
Okay.
One of the big ones is the UTS Vice Chancellor's International Scholarship.
And that's,
That one can cover up to 100% of your tuition fees.
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. Then they've got Academic Excellence Awards,
Right.
which are for high-achieving students.
Hmm.
And they also have need-based aid
I see.
for students who are struggling financially.
Yeah.
And all of the sources emphasize that you should apply early.
Right.
These scholarships are competitive.
Yeah.
So the earlier you apply, the better your chances are.
That's always good advice to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say someone gets accepted and they figure out the finances.
Right.
What's student life actually like at UTS? What kind of campus and facilities can they expect?
So they describe it as a modern urban campus that's really woven into the city,
Okay.
which makes for a really cool backdrop.
Yeah, definitely. And what about the facilities?
They're great. The UTS library is a highlight.
Okay.
It's a modern learning hub with high-tech study spaces, lots of digital resources, and research assistants.
That's great.
And for science and engineering students, they have the Super Lab,
Okay.
which is this state-of-the-art research facility with tons of opportunities for hands-on experiments.
Wow.
And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, they have the Startup Hub.
What is that?
It's a space where you can get resources, mentorship, and collaborate with others to develop your business ideas.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a really cool resource.
So where do students live? What are the housing options?
They have both on-campus and off-campus housing.
Okay, so tell me more about on-campus.
On campus, they have UTS housing apartments.
Okay.
They're modern, secure, and a good way to connect with other students.
Right, you're living with other students.
Exactly. Off campus, you can find private rentals, shared houses, or apartments or homestays in the surrounding suburbs.
Okay.
But you have to keep in mind that on-campus housing fills up fast.
Yeah, demand is high.
So you need to start looking early.
Right.
And Sydney's rental market can be pretty competitive.
Yeah, so definitely don't wait till last minute to start looking.
For sure. Now, university is more than just classes and studying.
Definitely. What's the social scene like at UTS?
It's very vibrant.
Okay.
They have over 150 clubs and societies.
Wow, 150.
I know, right? There's something for everyone. Academic, cultural, sports, creative arts.
So many choices.
Joining a club is a great way to meet like-minded people and make friends.
Right, and to make friends outside of your classes.
Exactly. They also have strong sports programs and networking events throughout the year.
Networking events.
Yeah, where students can connect with industry professionals.
That's great.
And the UTS Union is really active in organizing all sorts of social activities and supporting student life.
Okay, so it seems like there's a good balance between academics and social life.
Yeah, they seem to have a really well-rounded approach.
Now let's talk about the challenges. Studying abroad can be really tough.
Right.
And even just starting university in general can come with obstacles. What are some of the issues students might face at UTS, especially international students?
So a few things come up consistently.
Okay.
First, academic pressure. UTS is known for its rigorous academics.
Okay.
So keeping up with all the assignments, projects, and exams can be stressful.
Yeah, it can be a lot to handle.
Another big one is financial struggles. especially for international students.
Yeah, tuition and living expenses in Sydney,
Exactly.
not to mention exchange rates.
Yeah, those can be unpredictable.
Yeah,
Then there's visa and immigration issues.
right.
Things like renewing your visa and understanding the work restrictions that come with your student
So
visa.
making sure you're following all the rules,
Mm-hmm. Then there's the challenge of finding good and affordable housing in Sydney.
which can be tricky.
Yeah, rent is high, and you might end up with a long commute.
And then there's the whole social and cultural adaptation.
Right, that can be huge,
Yeah.
especially if you're from a completely different culture.
Mhm.
There might be language barriers, you might get homesick, and just adjusting to a new way of life can be hard.
Yeah, it's a big adjustment.
And lastly, even though UTS has great industry links,
Right.
finding a job or internship can still be tough, especially in those really competitive fields.
Yeah, for sure. So it's not all smooth sailing.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But luckily, the sources you gave me also include tips for studying at UTS in 2025.
Okay. So let's go through those. What do they say about dealing with the academic pressure?
The biggest thing is to take advantage of the resources UTS offers, the
Mhm.
UTS library and its study spaces.
So not just using it to borrow books.
No, they have quiet areas for focused work, but also research assistance and academic support services.
Okay, so they can get help if they're struggling with a particular subject.
Exactly.
And what about financial issues? What advice do they give for dealing with those?
Well, the most important thing is to apply for scholarships early.
Right, which we talked about earlier.
Yep. And to explore options for part-time work.
Right, because international students can work.
Yeah, they can work up to 48 hours every 2 weeks during the semester
Right.
and unlimited hours during breaks.
So that can definitely help with living expenses.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
What about visa and immigration issues?
What do they say about that?
The main thing is to stay informed about your student visa requirements.
Okay.
You need to make sure you're enrolled full-time in your course and that you're following all Australian immigration laws.
Right, so basically dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Exactly. Stay organized and know the rules.
Okay, what about finding accommodation? What tips do they have for that?
They say to start looking early and think about different options.
Right?
UTS student housing, which can be a good environment, especially if you're new to the city.
Yeah, it could be easier to adjust.
Right.
Yeah.
You can also look at shared apartments or houses in suburbs that are close to campus and maybe a bit cheaper. And homestays can be good for students who are new to the country because you get that extra support and cultural immersion.
Yeah, so you're living with a local family.
Exactly.
And what about that social and cultural adaptation? What can students do to make that transition easier?
They really emphasize the importance of participating in orientation week.
Week.
Yep. It's designed to help new students get to know each other, the campus, and all the resources available.
Right, so it's a good way to get your bearings.
Exactly. They also say to join clubs and societies.
Right, which are run by the UTS Union.
Yeah, that's a great way to meet people who share your interests and to feel like you belong.
Okay, and lastly, what about finding jobs and internships? What advice do they give?
They really encourage students to go after the internships that UTS offers.
Through their industry connections.
Exactly. They specifically mentioned partnerships with Google, Microsoft, PwC.
Wow, those are big names.
I know, right? And they say to utilize the career development services.
What do those services offer?
They can help you with things like writing your resume, preparing for interviews, and developing your job searching skills.
So they're giving students the tools they need to succeed.
Yeah, they're really setting them up for success.
Okay, so even though there are challenges, there's a lot of support available.
Exactly. There are definitely resources to help you navigate those challenges.
Okay, so now let's look beyond the student experience. What about the long-term benefits of studying at UTS? How can it impact your career and your future academic prospects?
Well, they really stress the practical, hands-on learning, the cutting-edge research, and the strong industry partnerships.
Right, which we talked about.
Yep. And that translates into some serious advantages for graduates.
Ag.
You're getting an education that's directly relevant to what employers are looking for.
Okay.
You have access to advanced technology and research facilities.
Which is a huge plus.
And a lot of programs include internships and work placement, so you're getting real-world experience while you study.
Right, so you're not just stuck in a classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that UTS is ranked in the top 150 globally means your degree will be recognized internationally.
Right, that opens doors.
And they have flexible study options like online on-campus and hybrid models.
So you can kind of tailor it to your needs.
Exactly.
And we even have some examples of successful UTS graduates.
Yeah, they mentioned alumni who are working at companies like Google, Deloitte, and Microsoft.
Wow.
I know, right? And there are students who've started their own businesses with the help of the UTS Startups program.
That's so inspiring.
It really shows how a UTS education can lead to concrete career success.
Okay, so they're not just saying it, they're proving it.
Exactly.
Now, to give our listeners a better sense of the people at UTS, you also brought some info about some of the leading experts and leaders there.
I did.
Tell me about them.
So we have Professor Louise M. Ryan, who's a world-renowned biostatistician.
Okay.
She's done a lot of work in cancer and environmental health risk assessment.
So really important stuff.
Yeah, her work has had a major impact on public health. Then we have distinguished Professor Kingi J. Gu.
Oh, okay.
He's a leader in antennas, electromagnetics, and wireless communications.
Wow.
He heads up the Global Big Data Technology Center at UTS,
Okay.
and he's known for his groundbreaking work in wireless technology.
So he's pushing the boundaries in his field.
Definitely.
Who else is there?
Professor Philippa Gale.
Okay.
He's the Vice Dean for Science and a professor of chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
He's known for his research in supramolecular chemistry,
Okay.
specifically anion transport, which has applications in a bunch of different scientific and medical fields.
So his work is quite diverse.
Yeah, and then there's distinguished Professor Kaur Stell.
What's her area of expertise?
She's a leader in electromagnetic and antenna engineering.
Okay.
She was actually named Australia's top professional engineer in 2022.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And she leads the Metasteers team.
Okay.
They won a Eureka Prize for their work in protecting Australia from security threats. Wow, so they're doing really important work.
Yeah, they're making a real difference.
Okay, so we've got top researchers in all sorts of fields. What about AI?
Right, they have Professor Marianne Williams.
What does she do?
She's an expert in artificial intelligence and AI policies.
Okay.
She co-founded the AI Policy Hub,
Mm-hmm.
and she led the UTS RoboCop team to multiple world championships.
Wow, in robotics.
Yeah, so they're clearly a force to be reckoned with in AI.
That's impressive.
Mm.
Okay. And any other experts we should know about?
The last one is Professor Chris Turnkey.
Okay.
He's an earth scientist specializing in climate research.
Okay, another really important area.
Yeah, he's the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research at UTS,
Hmm.
and he's published a ton of research in his field.
Okay, so he's a leading voice in climate science.
Definitely.
So it seems like UTS is a real hub for cutting-edge research and innovation.
Yeah, they're doing some amazing work.
You also mentioned the Data Science Institute.
Yes, that's a major resource at UTS.
What do they do?
They focus on statistics and data analysis.
And they work with businesses and government agencies to use data to solve problems.
Like,
Things like improving urban infrastructure, healthcare, transportation.
so they're using data to make a real-world impact.
Exactly.
Okay, now I know you looked at some fictionalized success stories of students who went to UTS with help from an organization called LetzStudies. Can
Yeah.
you tell us about those?
Sure. So the first one is Rahul.
Okay.
He's an engineering graduate from Bangalore, and he wanted to get a master's in data science.
Mhm.
But he found the application process really overwhelming.
Which is understandable.
Yeah, it's a lot to navigate. But with some guidance, he managed to figure out the requirements, the visa procedures, the scholarships,
Okay,
and he got into UTS.
that's great.
And now he's working on some cool AI projects.
So his story shows that it's possible to overcome those initial hurdles.
Exactly. You just might need a little help.
Right. And what about the next story?
The next one is Aisha.
Okay.
She's a commerce student from Hyderabad, and she wanted to get a master's in business analytics, but she was worried about the cost.
Right. It's a big financial commitment.
Yeah, but she got help applying for the UTS Vice Chancellor's International Scholarship,
Okay.
and she got it.
Wow. So that really helped her financially.
It made a huge difference. She's doing really well at UTS now. She's networking. She's working as a research assistant.
That's fantastic.
Her story highlights how important it is to explore those scholarship options.
Absolutely. And what's the last story?
The last one is Kartika.
Okay.
He's an IT professional from Chennai, and he wanted to study cybersecurity at UTS.
Okay.
But he had trouble with the IELTS exam.
Right. The English proficiency test?
Yep. But he got some personalized IELTS training and support,
Okay.
and his score improved enough for him to meet the UTS requirements.
So he was able to overcome that obstacle.
Yeah, and now he's getting practical experience in ethical hacking and cybersecurity.
That's great.
His story shows how targeted support can help you overcome specific academic challenges.
So these stories, even though they're fictionalized, really highlight some of the common issues that international students might face.
Yeah.
And they show that with the right support,
Mm-hmm.
you can overcome those challenges and achieve your goal of studying at UTS.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways that our listeners should remember about UTS?
I'd say the main things are that it has a really strong academic reputation, especially in technology business and health sciences.
Okay.
It has those strong industry connections, which means you're getting a practical, career-focused education.
Mm-hmm.
It offers a diverse and exciting student life in a dynamic city,
Yeah, Sydney's a great city.
and there's a lot of support available for international students.
Okay, so if someone's interested in UTS, what should they do next?
Definitely research the specific admission requirements for their program.
Okay.
Look into scholarship options thoroughly and apply early.
Right.
And don't be afraid to reach out to the university and use those support services.
So be proactive. Well, this has been a really informative deep dive into UTS.
It has been.
We learned a lot.
We have.
So thinking about UTS and its focus on technology and innovation and all the amazing expertise they have there, what field of study or research that we talked about today are you most curious about?
That's a good question.
And what questions do you have about how it could impact your future?
Yeah, that's something to think about.
Definitely. It's something for all of our listeners to consider as they explore their academic options.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.